What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Trust Your Board podcast. My name's Stephen Wright. I am joined, as always, by Mr. William Monroe. Willie, how you doing, man?
Not doing so bad. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. We got a special episode here today. We got another Dynasty Startup Mock Draft, but we have a special guest with us here. His name's Rocky. You might know him as Dynasty FF Addict on Twitter. Rocky, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you guys having me on. We're a newer podcast that I'm hosting, and I'm looking forward to doing this mock. Who doesn't love a good mock?
Amen.
Yeah, for sure, man. So let's go the logistics out of the way before we jump in here. I had mentioned you had a Twitter account. What's your Twitter handle for everybody that wants to give you a follow?
Yeah, my Twitter account is at Dynasty FF Addict. I'm always posting polls and other sorts of crap on there. So, and you can always hit me up. My DMs are always open. So that's my Twitter handle.
Beautiful. And you mentioned a podcast. What's the name? Where can we find it? What do you guys talk about?
And the podcast is the Dynasty Junkies podcast. It's part of actually a podcast network, the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, which also includes the Trade Addicts Pod and Fantasy Timeline pods. We're basically, the concept of the pod is we basically run the gamut of Dynasty. We talk about all sorts of things, player values, giving commissioner stuff, Dynasty strategy, and we always end each show with a Find Me a Trade segment, which we actually used one of your guys' rosters for. We take listener submissions, and I know one of the early ones you guys gave us a roster, so that was nice. And we do that to just sort of analyze trades and values, incorporating roster construction and settings and things like that, because a lot of the trades you hear on pods are in a vacuum, so to speak. So I thought it was a nice different way to do it. And I co-host that with Dustin Church. He's at Dynasty Junkie FF. He was supposed to come on tonight, but real life got in the way. So I'm happy to be here myself, though.
Awesome. Well, judging by your Twitter avatar, you, like myself, are an Eagles fan. So I'm trying to get Steve to have more Eagles fans on the podcast. I'm glad he finally obliged me here. Yeah, we got a couple Eagles questions here for you. See what your thoughts are on a couple of things.
Sure, shoot.
So first off, it's kind of like a compound question just around the running back position overall. Like, what are your thoughts on Sanders? And then like a follow-up, what are your thoughts on like what Boston Scott will be if they don't send someone, or if they do send someone like Devonta Freeman?
Yeah, I'm a big Sanders guy. He's got all the talent in the world. I do think in Dynasty, his ADP is a little high up there, just because Peterson, we know, does love to rotate backs. I'm still not convinced they don't bring somebody in. There was just a news bit today that Devonta Freeman is trying to get his agent to find him a job. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up with the Birds. So I don't think I do think that Doug Peterson has never had a Sanders, so I definitely think he'll get more work than the typical Peterson committee back does. But I am a little worried that they'll sign somebody else. And going to what you said, I do like Scott too. Scott definitely was involved at the end of last year when both were healthy. He's good at receiving out of the backfield. I like him as a nice bench piece, but I definitely see Sanders. Obviously Sanders is the main guy. I can see a big season out of Sanders. I get the top 5 upside. I just think it's a little over the top with some of what you see in the Dynasty community, that the way people are touting him, just because I don't feel like the Peterson committee back thing is being factored in quite enough with how the hype is gone for Sanders right now.
Yeah, he's definitely gotten a ton of hype. I feel like unless I'd seen him in like the second round, it's reasonable, but I could definitely see people probably reaching even higher than that, just based on the current hype train.
Yeah, and people love to get those running backs because they do thin out early. And so I definitely I see him some places sometimes going in the late first, early second. I'd be more comfortable mid to late second in a Dynasty startup.
Then the other question is kind of the other important position. As you probably are well aware from watching the second half of last year, they were working with basically nothing at the wide receiver position. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Eagles' wide receiver core is going to look like this year. You got Jalen Reagor coming in. Hopefully Jackson's healthy. Sounds like Alshon Jeffrey is going to be on the pup. Then you got, maybe Marquise Goodwin has some relevancy, maybe J-Jaw. What do you think just overall for the receiving core, and kind of who are the guys that you would want to have as pieces in this core going forward?
Well, yeah, Rieger's the obvious one. It's a little concerning about what he might do this year. The whole COVID thing, the rookies haven't been able to have the normal preparation they would have. But in that receiving core, like you said, I agree. Alshon's going to start on PUP. You can't depend on Jackson. So even though I'm a little worried about rookies in general this year producing right away, I can definitely see Reagor having one of the better rookie wide receiver seasons this year. And beyond him, I do think J-Jaw maybe has a chance to show a little something because, Alshon's not going to be there. He can fill the Alshon role. I know he got some opportunity last year and didn't really produce with it, but I definitely like him as sort of a late round sleeper that you can go and get, or a guy you can trade for really cheap. I did like him a lot coming out. I also love Reagor coming out this year. He was my wide receiver 3 after Lamb and Judy before the draft. And I don't think he could have ended up in a better landing spot. But J-Jaw, I still think he's got a similar Alshon type game. He can be a red zone threat. And I definitely think he could be more than what people are expecting this year. So I think those two are the two guys to target, especially J-Jaw you can get cheap. And, Alshon and D-Jax are just about done. So, and Marquise Goodwin I don't really care about. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would look at the young guys, and I expect Reagor to produce pretty decently this year for a rookie. He's obviously not going to likely have 1,000-yard season or anything like that, but I do like him a lot as one of the better rookies to produce this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I know I personally, in one of my Dynasty leagues, I drafted J-Jaw last year. I had acquired Deshaun Jackson on the cheap, and now I have Reagor as well. So I'm running with all 3. So I'm trying to figure out who has value to move, who does, who to keep. Obviously, I would love to keep Reagor, but we'll see what happens.
And it'll be
interesting.
Yeah, especially, and Ertz and Goddard are going to be a big part of that as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Absolutely. That's all I really got here. Anything else, Steve, before we start it up?
No, we're going to go ahead and jump into it here. Rocky, what we're going to do here for the first 2 spots is just plug in McCaffrey and Barkley. Reason being that Sleeper does have them as 1 and 2, but Sleeper also does randomize ADPs and won't go strictly based on ADP. So me and Will have seen plenty of drafts where the first pick's like Dalvin Cook, and then the second pick's McCaffrey, and then the third Zeke, and then the Barkley somehow gets the 4th, which is like, is it possible? Sure, but it's very unlikely. And
yeah,
I'm in the 4th slot. I don't want that. Well, I want that to happen to me, but for the sake of this mock, we're not going to have that happen to me. So we're going to plug them in here, and we're going to get the ball rolling. Sound good, guys?
Sure.
Sounds great.
Let's do it.
Cool. So we got them 2 off the board, and Michael Thomas actually going off the board next. A big jump from here, but I mean, some people do go wide receiver early in Dynasty leagues, given the longevity. So cannot argue with that. It is a bit of a tough slot because I do like going wide receiver early as well, but being I'm up in the 4 spot, that's a bit harder to do. I need to be more like in those later rounds to start pulling that off. So for me, it's pretty easily Zeke. He's my 3rd guy. I got McCaffrey and Barkley kind of in their own, or in their first tier, and I got Zeke in a tier of his own right now. So he's my favorite option. High-powered offense, great running back, and I'm excited to start my team with him. Again, I bounce around with my strategy a lot, so we'll see what'll happen moving forward. We got Alvin Kamara, Tyreek Hill, and Devontae Adams going off the board before you, Rocky.
Okay, and then I'm sort of like you. I don't really stick to. I'm not a RB guy or a wide receiver guy. I like to go where the value takes me, and looking at it here, I think the value, though, is looking at running back to me. And this may be a little high for this guy, but I'm going to go with Joe Mixon. I love Mixon, especially this year. I think the drafting of Burrow is going to help the passing game. Zach Taylor in his 2nd year there. Mixon balled out at the end of last year. And The added receiving weapons with T. Higgins, AJ Greenback. I just really like this offense to be a lot better than people expected to be. They also have improvement with the O line this year because they got their first round pick back from injury. So I'm going with Mixon, especially running backs. Even though it is dynasty, running backs do thin out very early. So if the value is there for the running back, I do like a running back, but I'm going with Mixon. So the next two picks look like they're going to be Dalvin Cook at the 109 and DeAndre Hopkins at the 110, which will bring us to Will.
Yeah, that was a good pick. I was actually thinking Mixon would be the one that would be on the board there for me. It's interesting. I did not think Godwin would be available. I think probably is the pick here, just because I do like a few running backs available in Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders are all there. There's a couple other receivers too, if some of them go. So I'm not afraid to go wide receiver heavy, load up on a couple of veteran backs, just because the longevity of the wide receiver position. So with Chris Godwin on the board, pretty easy I'm going to go him, and then kind of hope that I can get either Nick Chubb or Josh Jacobs maybe in the next round, but more than okay to go with this Juju or DJ Moore as well. We'll see what number 12 does here after me, but we'll lock in Chris Godwin first. We go Evans and DJ Moore. Interesting. So we still got Nick Chubb on the board. Josh Jacobs and Juju are really appealing to me, but I can't pass up on Nick Chubb. I get the worry about Kareem Hunt, but I do think that he's likely gone after the next year. And, there's a chance maybe they try to move him mid-season. You don't see it too often in the NFL, but people say that there's a possibility for that. I just think even though he doesn't get a ton of receptions, he just is too good of a player. I think the line is a lot better this year. As long as Baker isn't as bad as he was in last year, I don't know. You can have the efficiency numbers of his rookie year, but I think Nick Chubb is just a shoe in there. So we'll lock in Godwin and Nick Chubb. After that goes Juju and Miles Sanders to you.
Okay, yeah, Miles going early again, like we talked about, and
called it.
And I'm going to go with, again, this is something I like to do, even though this isn't a tight end premium league. I really value the high end tight ends in Dynasty and redraft, and I'm going to go George Kittle here. I just think getting one of those top guys gives you a real positional advantage. He's. I just saw a tweet today that he's produced the most receiving yards in his first 3 seasons of any tight end, basically ever, dating back to 1920. He's averaging about 1,000 yards a year over his career so far, and the offense basically runs through Kittle. Debo's going to be hurt at the beginning of the year, which will only help him this year at the beginning. And they did draft Ayuk, but you can't really depend on rookies. So just like always, Kittle's going to get his. And I like a lot drafting a tight end early. I'm a guy you'll see with a lot of Kittles and Kelseys on my dynasty teams. So the next 3 picks were Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs, which brings us back to Steve at 209.
Yeah, so I'm going to run down the running back and wide receiver positions real quick, just to give an update on who's available. So we have at the running back position, Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, and J.K. Dobbins. At the wide receiver position, we're looking at Amari Cooper, A.J. Brown, Kenny Golladay, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones. So a lot of good wide receivers left on the board. I am perfectly fine with punting that at least until the next round, maybe even further, and just kind of go running back heavy. Not something I would normally do, but you mock draft to experiment a little bit. So I think I'm not somebody that trusts rookies very easily. So I draft in Dynasty to build a win now team. And I am not somebody that trusts rookies at all. Like, I want to see it before I invest in it, but I'm going to make an exception for that rule. And I'm going to go ahead and draft Jonathan Taylor here. It's just hard to fathom him not being incredibly successful with that O-line and that coaching staff. in Indy. Maybe this year you can definitely make a case that it's probably more of a 50-50 split, especially early in the season, given that camp is a mess and there's going to be no preseason. So you could definitely see Mac getting a heavy load early on as it kind of eased Jonathan Taylor into the NFL. But long term and after those first initial weeks, I think he's going to be a beast. So I'm going to go ahead and lock him in as my second running back here. We do have Amari Cooper, A.J. Brown, and Julio Jones going off to round out the second. Kenny Galladay, Odell Beckham, and Allen Robinson to start the third. So a heavy wide receiver run happening. And that has given me some value at the running back position. So I will go ahead and I'll punt the wide receiver position. I'll grab a third running back here. Just a matter of who. So we still got everyone on the board that I had mentioned before. A lot of solid options. I could go with a youth play in Swift or Dobbins. I could go with an upside play of Aaron Jones or Kenyon Drake. We got the volume plays in Fournette. So there's a lot of different players here. I'm going to, as much as I would love to add J.K. Dobbins, Will knows I'm a big J.K. Dobbins fan. I don't want two rookies, given that I want to win now, and J.K. Dobbins is even a more precarious position with Ingram there. So I think I'm going to reach a little bit, and I'm going to grab Todd Gurley. I think he's got a solid floor to him. I think for like a win-now team, he's going to get a ton of usage this year. It's a one-year deal. I can't see the Falcons being able to afford to sign him again after this. So we'll see. I think they're going to really run him into the ground. A lot of touchdown upside. So I think I'm going to reach a little bit. What do you think of that move, Rocky?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do think it is a little bit of a reach, especially in Dynasty, but I can definitely see him having an RB1 season in 2020. And if you're going full on win now, and he's got no competition whatsoever, that offense should still be pretty good. And like you said, I think he's got a lot of touchdown upside. So I get it. I don't think I would have picked him there, but I definitely get the pick, and it's definitely going to help you win in 2020, assuming 2020 goes off as planned.
Yeah, I don't know if in a real draft I'd be able to do it, but in a mock when there's nothing at stake and you're kind of experimenting, I can definitely pull the trigger. So we'll go ahead and grab Gurley there. Our first quarterback goes off the board, Pat Mahomes, right after me. Then we had Cooper Kupp and Calvin Ridley continuing this wide receiver run here. To you, Rocky.
Yeah, lots of wide receivers going off the board. And looking at the wide receivers, I still think there's a lot of depth there, and there's no one I love at this spot. I mean, there's a lot of guys I like. There's Sutton and Metcalf, Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, DJ Chark. But I think I'm going to do the same thing you did and go running back here. There's a couple guys I'm looking at. I do like Aaron Jones a bit as a guy you can get a little cheaper than he probably should be at this point. I think people are thinking he's going to be replaced next year, or Dylan's going to make it a committee, which I don't think it's going to be as much of a committee as people think between the three guys there. But I am actually going to go with Austin Eckler. I've really warmed up to Eckler this offseason. And I was slow to come around on him in general over the last couple of years. The guys who were more pass catchers, I always seem to have trouble warming up to when they don't have the big rushing load. But he's shown he can do it with under 200 carries because he gets so much work in the passing game. And I think those guys too tend to have a longer career span, just because they're not taking the abuse between the tackles so much. So I think he's a good play for Dynasty too. Plus San Diego, Los Angeles signed him this offseason to an extension. So I think he's a decent long-term play, and I love him in 2020. And he showed the top 5 upside last year. So I love getting him as my RB2 in the 3rd round. So I'm going to take Austin Eckler here. And the next 2 picks goes Travis Kelce and yet another receiver in Cortland Sutton, and then Will's up at the 311.
Yeah, this is an interesting spot. There's a few guys that I like here. The top 2 on the board, Lamar Jackson's really appealing. I don't usually like to go quarterback early, but I'll go earlier here in Dynasty startups. And I don't know that Lamar has maybe the length of a career in him that Mahomes does, just because of the way he runs the ball. But, the next 5 to 10 years, I think, are going to be very exciting with him. The other guy that I really, really like, and I mentioned him yesterday in our mini mock, was DK Metcalf. I think he is a stud. I think this is a year that he really breaks out, in wide receiver 2 at the lowest. I think he could have that wide receiver 1 upside with Russell paired with him going forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock in DK Metcalf. A couple running backs that I like. You got your rookies in Swift and Dobbins. You still got Kenyon Drake there, Leonard Fournette. So a lot of guys that I don't mind grabbing there. But I want to lock in that DK Metcalf, and we'll see if the 12 team really makes me think about Lamar at this next pick here. So we'll go DK Metcalf. After that, you go Jerry Jeudy and Lamar Jackson. Understandable there. So Aaron Jones still on the board, which is interesting. I'm not a huge Aaron Jones fan, but he is only 25. I don't really know exactly what his contract situation is. I think he's up either after this year or the year after. But it's got an interesting team around him. They did just draft a running back, so I'm not really thrilled about that. I think at this point I look to the rookie position or Kenyon Drake. I'm really high on Drake this year. I don't know that he has super long shelf life, but with the team that I'm kind of building here, it's they're all ready to win now. The receivers probably have a little more longevity. We'll see about Chubb. So I'm kind of leaning maybe a little more win now. So I think we're going to go with Kenyon Drake here. Might be a little more of a reach, but given that I have, super long wait, there's no way he's getting back to me. And I just don't think there's any running backs that I'd love to get back to me next round. So I'm going to go Kenyon Drake to lock in a second running back pair with Chubb, Godwin, and Metcalf. I'd be really happy with the foundation of this team for those first 3 picks, and then Drake to really solidify my attention, hopefully, in this year. So we will lock in Kenyon Drake. After Drake goes Keenan Allen and Aaron Jones to you, Rocky.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say I really like the DK pick. That's another guy I've warmed up to. I bought into the combine negativity with him last year, and I've really come around on him. I do like Lockett a lot as well, who you can get later. But for Dynasty, DK is a really nice pick. Drake, I'm a little more iffy on. But anyway, so that leaves it to me. And there's, some nice rookie backs still on the board. Swift and Dobbins are still there. Akers, Fournette's still hanging around. There's some decent receivers I like, but no one I think there's Lamb, Diggs, Chark, McLaurin, but no one I think I want to draft as high as the 4th round. I already got Kittle, so this is actually going to be a little bit of a unorthodox move for me, because I'm generally a guy that likes to wait on quarterback. But I think I'm going to go with Dak here. And which is hard for me to say as an Eagles fan.
I hear that.
But even in 1 QB, again, I drafted a win now. I'm trying to draft a win now team, just like Steve said he likes to do. I think I've done that. So it's young, but I definitely think it's a team that can win now. And Dak's just overloaded with weapons at this point. It's hard to see him not producing really, really well again this year. With Lamb and Gallup and Amari plus Zeke. A lot of people like Jarwin as a low-key late-round tight end. So, and he still has a pretty good offensive line. So, it's not something I would normally do, but like you said, in a mock, you can experiment a little bit. I'm generally a guy even in Superflex, and this is 1 QB, but even in Superflex, I'm generally a guy who likes to wait on quarterback. But I just wasn't in love with a lot of the other options there. I do love some of the backs that were there. I do for Dynasty in general. Dobbins I like a lot, but I don't expect him to produce a ton this year because of Ingram and Lamar running the ball himself. So I'm going with Prescott. So the next 3 picks were 2 more receivers in Chark and CeeDee Lamb, and then DeAndre Swift win at 408, which brings us to Steve at 409.
Yeah, so but before I go through my thought process, I do want to clarify for the listeners, the roster that we're building is 1 QB, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end, and 2 flex. So definitely a little heavier on the wide receiver position. I bring
And
that
yet,
up.
me and you both don't have a receiver
I
yet.
know. That's the issue, because I really want J.K. Dobbins right now. There's so many good running backs: Dobbins, Fournette, Akers, Montgomery. Like, I love a lot of these guys, but man, that's gonna put me in a hole at wide receiver. Ah, man. So let me read off the wide receivers real quick. We got Diggs, McLaurin, Robert Woods, Deebo Samuel, Tyler Boyd, Tyler Lockett. Oh boy, that's tough. I'm looking at the board. It does look like we got some really wide receiver heavy teams here. The teams after me, they got 3 wide receivers, and then the other 2 only got 1 running back each. 2 of the teams between me and you, Rocky, only got 1 running back. Will is flanked with wide receivers over there. So I guess the play would be to grab my wide receiver now, or my running back now, because they're probably going to see a lot of them going, and then I should still be able to get some value at wide receiver. And I guess I'll go ahead and roll the dice with that plan. So I'm going to draft a running back first, and then I'll draft my wide receiver next. The question is which one. I really want J.K. Dobbins, but like you said, I don't know how much he contributes this year. Now, building a win now team, so that kind of sucks, but I don't think I could pass him up. I mean, the starting running back for that offense for years to come, combined with Jonathan Taylor and how many years left we got of Zeke, that's a scary thought. So I'm going to have to go with Dobbins here, and then we'll see what happens. My plan's not working out with the first few picks, and none of the picks. Wow. Stefon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, and Cam Akers go to finish off the 4th. To start the 5th, Robert Woods, Deebo Samuel, and Mark Andrews. So still very running back heavy, which is a shame. It's also a shame because Robert Woods would have been awesome, and so would have McLaurin. What can you do? So there's one wide receiver here that's jumping off the board at me. Rocky had mentioned him earlier, and that's going to be Tyler Lockett. He's a pretty safe option with a lot of upside, attached to a great wide receiver. Well, he is attached to hopefully a great wide receiver, but a great quarterback in Russell Wilson. So I'm going to lock him in. I feel relatively safe with him as my first wide receiver, as safe as I'm going to feel amongst a lot of these players. Thielen would definitely be a real good win now option as well, but given the age difference, so it's hard to pass up Lockett. So I'm going to lock in Lockett as my first wide receiver here. We had Boyd go off right after me, and then Melvin Gordon and Leonard Fournette.
Okay, that brings it back to me. I love the Dobbins pick, by the way. Even though you are going win now, I think by next year he's high end RB1. So, yeah. But this makes it tough though. Like you said, there's so many receivers off the board, and I don't have one. And yet again, though, I don't love the value for most of these receivers in the 5th round. Because what's here is Jarvis Landry, Adam Thielen. By ADP, these are the highest guys: Rager, Jefferson, Hollywood Brown. Man, and some of these running back. You know what? I'm going to go running back again. Some of the guys that are listed at the top here: David Montgomery, Devin Singletary, Kareem Hunt. I'm actually going to go with the next guy that's listed below them and go Chris Carson. I don't like him as a long-term play. I don't see him having a ton of long-term value. He does get the injury bug a lot. He is going into his final year, so who knows if the Seahawks will re-sign him. But I don't see Carlos Hyde as a lot of competition. And Rashad Penny almost certainly is going to start the season on the PUP list. So Chris Carson has been and will be the workhorse back there, and have him as an RB3. I believe I can still start him in a flex in this format. So, Yeah. So I definitely see a lot of points coming from Carson this year. They've always been a run-based offense. They never see, even though they got one of the best quarterbacks in the league, they never want to seem to cut him totally loose. So I'm going to go with Carson and roll with those 3 running backs and my Prescott and Kittle. So the next, again, we have a couple more receivers going off the board at Justin Jefferson and Jarvis Landry with the next 2 picks. So we're back to Will.
Right. So it's interesting. There's a couple of guys that come to mind. There's Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and Russell Wilson, a couple of quarterbacks that are still on the board that I'm considering for the next pick in the 6th round, being that the guy behind me already have Lamar Jackson. You, like I mentioned, don't usually like to go quarterback too early, but when we're talking dynasty, we're talking long term. guys like that. I think Kyler would be awesome if I can, get him in the next round, which I don't imagine the next guy will take him. So then I'm really just looking at a couple of guys here for this round pick. Not thrilled with the running backs available. I mean, Le'Veon Bell would be, a really fun flex this year. You'd hope, but you don't know. Who knows about James Conner? Singletary is interesting to me. I'm not super high on him, but I do think there's a role there. I don't know if he has the goal line work now, though. And being win now, to a degree, I think this is kind of where I can pivot one way or the other. So it kind of comes down to one wide receiver and a tight end here. Rager's on the board. I know we talked about him earlier. I'm a big fan. I think he has a really good career, and putting him with DK Metcalf and Godwin would be awesome. Likely be looking to go wide receiver. It's a little safer option for 2020 later in the draft. But I think I'm going to lean in a little bit more here with the win now and go with the guy that I think there's some value to in Zach Ertz. I know, it's kind of a ticking time bomb. A lot of people, he's still going to be valuable this year, probably the year after. We'll have to see what they do with Goddard and with Ertz. You imagine, probably maybe after 2021, maybe after this year, they try to make a move. I know Ertz is under contract for a few more years. But as long as he's there with Wentz, I think that there's a ton of value there. And if I'm looking to win this year and even the next couple years with the running backs that I have, I think Ertz is the pick here, and we'll see what this guy after me does. So we'll lock in Zach Ertz. After me goes David Johnson and Jalen Reagor. So it makes it a little easier for me. I would have been tempted to go Reagor after Ertz there, but
to clarify, Will, it's David Montgomery that went, not David Johnson.
David Johnson. No, David Montgomery, correct. Yeah. So looking at the guys on the board here, we still have, your quarterbacks that I mentioned, those top three, and Murray, Watson, Wilson. Wide receivers, you're looking at Thielen, Marquise Brown, Michael Gallup, Dante Parker, Kirk, Ruggs. I do know that I need to go a third wide receiver at some point, but I'm not really thrilled with any of them. It'd probably be maybe a Hollywood Brown. I mean, Thielen wouldn't be bad here. It'd be a third wide receiver, but he'd be a guy that, looking to win now and then looking to try to flip. I know Steve and I had trouble flipping him in a league. We finally did end up trading him, but had to basically trade away a young running back with him to get really good value. So it's not easy to trade those guys when they get a little older. So not going tight end. I'd probably be looking at either a Singletary or Hollywood Brown, or looking to go with a young quarterback. So I think I'm going to go with a pivot. And I usually don't go tight end and quarterback early in the draft, but I think I'm going to see what happens here if I can lock in Kyler Murray and have the quarterback position, good for the future. Probably, don't need to reach on a quarterback after that. And then maybe go with a younger tight end, in the middle rounds to waiting in the wings for Ertz. It's going to be tough waiting a whole another 20-some picks to get, my fifth skill position guy, not counting Ertz, but we'll see what happens. That's why we do the mock draft. So we're going to lock in Kyler, and after him goes Evan Ingram and Adam Thielen.
I got sniped by the sleeper auto pick.
Oh, no.
I was definitely going to go Thielen. I kind of liked him, since I waited so long as my wide receiver one. I could see him producing a low-end wide receiver one season with Diggs gone there. But with him gone, I got to look elsewhere. So I got the three running backs already. Singletary, Hunt, Connor, Bell, Vaughn are some of the guys on the board. I kind of feel like I need to maybe even reach again. I think most of these guys are reaches at this point, just because the sleeper auto picks have been so receiver heavy. But I don't love having this guy as my wide receiver one, but I don't really love anybody left as my wide receiver one. So I'm going to take Devontae Parker. Miami's still not a great team. So there's definitely should be volume there. There should be a lot of passing. I think Fitz is going to be starting a lot of the year. And Fitz and Parker had a pretty good chemistry last year. So I definitely see a lot of volume. Preston Williams will cut into that now that he's back. But I definitely like having Parker here. and there's not really much else better to take. I still think he's the wide receiver one in Miami. He'll get the volume, and I got to take a receiver at some point. So that's who it's going to be. So the next pick is Hollywood Brown. Hunter Henry went after that, and then Devin Singletary at 608, which brings us to Steve at 609.
Oh boy, yeah, the wide receivers, man, they dry up quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was sitting here myself like, man, it'd be really nice if Thielen got back to me. I was like, maybe everybody goes running back heavy. I was like, nah, but Rocky's there. That's not going to happen. And then Hollywood gets taken. Hollywood would have been my pick too. So this sucks.
I still like some of these RBs on the board, especially for a win now team. But I felt I need to grab a receiver.
Yeah, I wish I knew this earlier. I wouldn't have grabbed Gurley. There's Hunt here,
exactly.
Connor, Bell, like David Johnson, Geis. Man, the value is amazing right now. And I would also, like, you guys are both going with quarterbacks already. I would kind of like to lock in Watson or Russell Wilson right now, but I also feel like you guys have gone quarterbacks and maybe I shouldn't, just to kind of balance things out. So I guess we'll go ahead and pound away at the wide receiver position. Gallup would have been awesome before the Lamb pick, but I'm not trusting him long term now. Kirk is pretty interesting. I go a little bit further down ADP before I find guys that I would actually draft right now. Mike Williams, T.Y. Hilton, and Brandon Cooks, all guys that I'm considering. Mike Williams kind of worrisome because of the offense, the change at quarterback. Not a big fan there. T.Y. Hilton, I think maybe has win now potential for this year, but what does Rivers have left? We saw a lot of bad stuff last year, and what happens after Rivers leaves. And then Brandon Cooks, I've warmed up to him. I think he's going to be the one in Houston. I like Fuller, but he gets hurt too often, but I do worry about all the concussions. So definitely upside, but concerns with all three of them. For now, I'm going to go ahead and grab Christian Kirk, a solid wide receiver 2 in what should be a good offense for a long time. So I'm more comfortable with him, and then I'll play the game with the three others as we come back on the turn, unless something gets back to me here. We had Deshaun Watson, Michael Gallup, and Russell Wilson go off the board to end at the 6th. Starting the 7th, we had Kareem Hunt, Keyshawn Vaughn, and Henry Ruggs. So a bit of a split, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 quarterbacks going off the board. So I will go ahead and grab my third wide receiver now. And it basically comes down to what I was just saying. Do I like T.Y. Hilton more? Do I like Mike Williams? Or do I like Brandon Cooks? And ADP on Sleeper is now showing me A.J. Green. A little bit further down, more of a reach, much more of a gamble, but an opportunity to get a pretty elite wide receiver if he's healthy, attached to a young quarterback. Oh, man. If I was deeper, I'd probably do it. But, man, if he gets hurt again, that would put me in bad spot. So I think I'm going to go with Brandon Cooks here. Not old by any stretch of the imagination. Like I said, very concerned about these concussions. If he goes out there within the first few weeks and gets another concussion, that dude's done. So it's definitely a risky pick, but he could be the wide receiver 1 for a really good offense attached to a really good quarterback, and that's exciting. So we're going to lock him in here. T. Higgins, Will Fuller, and James Conner go off the board. For you, Rocky.
All right, and I got sniped again because I was going to take Cooks.
I got him.
Yeah,
stuck in the middle.
Yeah, I know his ADP is definitely later than the 7th round in Dynasty startups, but the receiver position has been going crazy in this mock. So, and I like him a lot. Like you said, I think he's the one there, and he had the mediocre year last year, but he was super consistent before that. Maybe not week to week, but year over year. So that leaves me with looking at this again and I still think there's good running back value on the board with Le'Veon Bell still there, David Johnson, Darius Geis. Wide receiver, I'm looking at N'Keal Harry is there, T.Y. Hilton, Deontay Johnson.
I think, Rocky, at this point, you just got to change your strategy and just draft running back and say, you know what?
That's what I'm thinking. In the middle
of the season, these guys are going to need a trade for running back. Now I'm going to have them.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm just going to go value. And I think in the 7th round, He's getting up there in age, but I think Le'Veon Bell is a great value in the 7th round. He's basically all they got there. They drafted LaMichael Pirine, but you can't expect much out of him. I don't think he's going to cut into Bell's work at all. And the Jets' offense is definitely iffy, but he's going to get all the work. He's probably at worst going to put up RB2 numbers, even in a not so great offense. And he's my RB4 now. So I'll definitely take it. I'll maybe trade him when he puts up a 100-yard game with like 5 catches for 90 yards, and then trade him for a wide receiver in season. But so the next 2 picks are T.Y. Hilton, and then David Johnson went, and now we're back to Will.
That's tough. Bell and David Johnson were going to be 2 running backs I was looking at to get that third back and flex position filled up for this year. There's a couple wide receivers, N'Keal Harry, Mike Williams are both interesting. They'd be guys that I'd be taking, more as my kind of longer-term wide receiver option. Probably want to bank on this year and have to go with a guy like a T.Y. Hilton. That would have been nice to still be available to solidify a guy. So I'm not, ever hesitant to like grab one of those younger wide receivers, rookies even, that you're not going to bank on as your wide receiver 3, even though the draft will tell you that it is, because there's going to be guys that later that you are more than willing to play for this first year while the other guys break in. That being said, it's tough. You got Harry, you got Mike Williams, you got a lot of the rookies there. AJ Green, as Steve mentioned, is in a really interesting one. Not really thrilled with really any of the running backs left. Geis is interesting as a third guy that you're not banking on. Mark Ingram, Raheem Mostert. But as you guys mentioned, wide receivers are running, and we do need to start 3. So what I think I'll do here, it's tough when you are at the 11 position, because I'm looking at all these guys and knowing that there's a good chance that most of them don't get back. Really debating between, a Harry or Mike Williams, and then looking at a running back like a Geis, or even an Ingram or Mostert if I want someone for winning now. With the guy behind me having 4 receivers already, I think if I wanted to go 1-1, running back's the play here. So being that I do have to reach for one of them, I think I'm going to look at Raheem Mostert, just the way this team's built. Him and Ingram are probably the 2 that I'm deciding between, but I think Mostert maybe has a little bit longer play. Maybe you get 2 or 3 years out of him, while I just see Dobbins taking that role sooner rather than later. So, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to go with the guy I think I'd rather have out of all of them. First, we'll go with the wide receiver and Harry, and see what this 12th team does here for me. If they take any of the other wide receivers or running backs, we'll see what happens. But I do want to get that younger wide receiver and Harry, and then with the focus on taking another wide receiver in the next few rounds, that would actually be wide receiver 3. But I just love the upside of Harry. Coming on, he seems like a really good buy low candidate after not really producing much at all, but being the 101, 102 in most drafts, rookie drafts last year. So we'll pivot here. I'm going to go N'Keal Harry, and we'll see what happens. After him goes Darren Waller and Darius Geis, and not bad. Still have a Mike Williams, still got some other rookie receivers here. AJ Green is an interesting option. It's a little bit of risk that is tough to pair with N'Keal Harry. So I think I'm going to look back to the running back position and go with the guy I mentioned earlier in Raheem Mostert. Kind of lock in my flex play for this year. Got a little bit of youth there. The team overall is really win now. So, Harry breaks out, great. If not, he's going to be a guy that hopefully will be able to fill in when some of my running backs are getting older and need to be traded in a couple of years. So we'll lock in Raheem Mostert here as my first flex. After him goes Carson Wentz and Mike Williams.
Okay, back to me. And I'm not loving the running back value as much here as last round. Some of the top guys on the board: Kerryon Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, and Marlon Mack, Sony Michel. And but there is a guy I do like a lot here, and at wide receiver, which is maybe he's getting a lot of hype in the dynasty community. Deontay Johnson. I definitely like him a lot. He led the league in separation yards per route run last year, which means he's getting open a lot, which is pretty important for a wide receiver. And he, he's got Ben coming back. Hopefully Ben can stay healthy. He managed to produce a decent rookie season with the atrociousness he had at quarterback last year. And I just like him a lot. I can definitely see him outproducing this 805 value here. So I'll take him as my wide receiver too, and I think he'll give me a pretty decent season there. So I'm going to lock him in at 805, which goes to the next three picks, which would be Noah Fant, Denzel Mims, and Darius Slayton. Back to Steve.
Okay, I'll be the guy that drafts AJ Green. That's fine. I'll roll the dice. I mean, his upside at this point's pretty awesome. And I got three guys that I'm somewhat confident in, so if he does get hurt and it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. It does worry me that I could be going into the immediate future and having him gone and Todd Gurley, but I mean, in the deeper rounds, it's kind of what's going to happen with some of these people. So we'll lock in AJ Green. We'll see what gets back to me. I'm not really leaning any particular direction, but we got Kerryon Johnson, TJ Hawkinson, Michael Pittman to round out the eighth. Starting the ninth, we have Goddard, Burrow, and Phillip Lindsay. I was considering Goddard, so that's a shame. But we'll look at the quarterback position here. We have Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford. At running back, Mark Ingram, Darrell Henderson, Marlon Mack, Sony Michel, Zach Moss. At wide receiver, Mecole Hardman, Brandon Ayuk, Laviska Shenault, Curtis Samuel, Sterling Shepard, and at tight end, Austin Hooper, Mike Gesicki, Tyler Higbee, Hayden Hurst. So at this point, I'm not loving the wide receivers. I'm kind of glad I grabbed AJ Green at this point. I don't need a running back. So to me, it's between quarterback and tight end. I can wait on either of them, but I can wait on quarterback a little bit longer. I will go ahead and grab a tight end now. I'm going to reach a little bit. I do like Gesicki. I do like Higbee, but both of them are a little bit more up in the air for me, where even though we haven't seen much from him, I see Hayden Hurst as being a pretty safe guy because of Matt Ryan and how he utilizes the tight end position. So we probably won't have time for it in this draft, but it's definitely a situation where I'm going to load up on some tight ends here and try to get some more hits. Maybe add a Jared Cook late to cover me if Hayden Hurst doesn't work out. Add a Chris Herndon late as a young upside guy to pair him with a Hurst in case he doesn't work out as well. So I'm going to lock him in here. I do trust him, but he is a bit of a risk. And wow, a little bit of a quarterback run going here. We got Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, and Matt Ryan going off the board before you, Rocky.
Which is fine with me, because after drafting Dak, I'm ignoring QB entirely and one QB for the rest of this draft. So, yeah, like you said, the wide receiver position, I purposely was sort of waiting on it earlier in this draft because in general it's pretty deep, but the way the sleeper auto picks drafted, it was just so receiver heavy, and what's left now is not great to look at. And this guy is a guy nobody likes, but I can't seem to give up on him. The guy's available. There's still Mark Ingram, but I'm worried about Dobbins splitting too much into his work there. Marlon Mack has as JT there, and nobody likes this guy but me. And it's maybe a little early to draft him. I could probably get him a little later, but I'm just not loving anybody else on the board right now. I'm actually going to take Sony Michel. I loved him coming out, and then he hasn't produced the way we all hoped he would. But he's still the lead dog there. With Cam there, I think it helps the running backs. Any mobile quarterback generally will help the running backs as the defense focuses on the mobile quarterback. How good they're going to be offensively, I don't know, but he's probably going to get most of the goal line carries. And I do worry a little bit about Damian Harris, that then maybe they use him a little more in year two. But I I just can't seem to give up on Sony. He was a top 3 back for me in the class he came out. He hasn't produced that way, but he's still got all the opportunity in the world. I wish James White wasn't there so they could use him in the passing game, because that was actually a positive for him coming out of Georgia. He actually was a pretty good pass catcher, and they've never used him that way. But I still think with the goal line opportunities, the offense might be a little better than people were originally thinking now that it's Cam instead of Stidham. So I'm going to take Sony and keep loading up on running back.
I like that pick, man. Good volume play.
Thanks. And so the next 2 picks went another quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, and then Ingram. And now it's back to Will at 9-11.
Right. So we've got an interesting amount of interesting crop of players here. You still got the tight ends, which every time you go tight end early and you see other tight ends you like in later rounds, it always puts you and then makes you second guess it. But you still have a Hooper, Gesicki, Higbee. I think Steve mentioned all of them. Be thrilled to get any of them there. But just looking back, I'd be looking at maybe a Hollywood Brown, maybe Parker. So guys that would be solid as wide receiver 3. But I just, I think Ertz does fill that line, especially looking to be a win now team. So gonna do a kind of back to back here. We're looking at 2 wide receivers in the next 2 picks. So probably look for one of the younger ones first. There's a couple of guys on my mind here. We have Brandon Ayuk and Preston Williams. I've been rising on Ayuk a little bit. Obviously, I think the natural kind of redraft rise on him with Debo Hurt. But he is a big play option. I do like having, safety in Godwin and Metcalf. I think Harry, if he pans out, he is going to be more of a consistent option. Whereas you got your big play threat with a Brandon Ayuk, kind of almost like I have 2 rookies with Harry barely ever play him. So I'm going to look at Ayuk likely. Like Preston Williams, Steve and I have him in a league that we run together. But I just think there's a little more risk there. I know we saw him produce a bit, but not a ton of draft capital in there. So if he, has a bad season, he has a much better chance of, flaming out after this year or the next year than a Brandon Ayuk. I think they're going to be committed to him for a couple of years being a first-round selection. So going to go Brandon Ayuk here, and then we're going to look for another receiver next that is really going to be my wide receiver 3 this year. So looking at what's available, still a couple interesting running backs. But given the 3 that I have, I think I can get some other depth guys later and then really just be focusing on that position going forward in rookie drafts. So we're looking back at the wide receiver position. You have some veteran guys in Sterling Shepard, Curtis Samuel, Anthony Miller. Not really thrilled with any of them. There is one guy that I think Steve may have in mind.
Come on, don't do it.
I was really banking on as my wide receiver 3 here, so I'm thrilled to get him here in the 10th round.
I hate you.
And that's Marvin Jones. Steve and I both are big fans of his. He is just the perfect wide receiver 3 for this team, right? I've got Ayuk, I've got Harry, so long term, don't have to worry about, Jones maybe only having a couple years left in the league, but pairing him in the starting lineup with Godwin and Metcalf, I think is perfect. Still have, kind of average to middle aged at running back. So thrilled to have that. So we're going to lock in Marvin Jones here. Not much else. So he's my wide receiver 3. After Marvin goes LaVisca Chenault and Curtis Samuel to you, Rob.
Damn you, Will. Sniped again.
Nice.
If anyone's ever listened to the Dynasty Junkies podcast, we are very pro Marvin Jones, just like you 2 guys are. He's
Let's go.
Supremely underrated.
So underrated.
Yeah. But and I still need a 3rd wide receiver, but I'm not loving these guys. The guy I actually like best is Preston Williams, and I have Devontae Parker. I hate doing that. It's having 2 guys on the same team. Sterling Shepard's there, Anthony Miller, Chris Campbell, who I like a little bit, is a sleeper. But at running back, there's Darrell Henderson, Marlon Mack, Zach Moss. Again, no one that I'm in love with. I actually think I am going to go with another tight end just because I like to value the best of the guys on the board. And I am going to take Mike Gesicki. Just a great athlete. He killed the combine coming out. he finally, well, not finally, but he showed something last year. I think he finished as tight end 12 or 13. And I've heard some narrative about Chan Gailey doesn't use tight ends a lot, but I don't think he's really had a Gesicki. If you look through his past tight ends with the Bills and some other teams, he hasn't really had much at the position. So, and really, Mike Gesicki is basically a big slot receiver. He's not even that much of an inline tight end. So, I'll take him as my backup tight end. Maybe he can even be flexed at some points, depending on how things go. And even though I have Devontae Parker, again, I don't love doing that, but I just didn't like anybody else as much here. I'd rather have Gesicki at the tight end position if I'm going to take another Dolphin than take Williams and have both Miami wide receivers. So I'm going to go Gesicki, even though he's. I also have Parker and he's a Dolphin. So Gesicki it is, putting that one in. And Jared Goff goes next. Anthony Miller, Sterling Shepard. Back to Steve.
Oh boy, I'm in a bit of a tough spot. There's three people I like on the board. Well, actually a few. I like Preston Williams, as you were saying. Big fan of his. I do like Edelman as a 1 year kind of guy. I like the floor that Crowder presents. In fact, I thought you were going to consider him, Rocky. I think his floor might pair well with the riskier nature, I guess, of Deontay Johnson and Parker. But
not a bad point.
He might also get around to you too.
True.
I'd love to lock in Matt Stafford right now. Big Matt Stafford fan.
It's your boy.
Yeah, I would love to lock him in, but I'm also I don't love him, but Ronald Jones is a big value right now at the running back position.
Well.
Young, part of what should be a good offense, so I don't think I could pass him up. I'm going to lock him in first and see what gets back to me. We got Preston Williams go off the board, Tyler Higbee, Daniel Jones to round out the 10th, Marlon Mack, Matt Stafford, and Alexander Mattson in the 11th. I will say, guys, we're coming up on time, so this round will be our last round, okay?
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
So, looking at the quarterback position, we got Tua, we got Sam Darnold, Drew Lock, Kirk Cousins, Tannehill, Garoppolo, Herbert, Breeze. I have waited too long. That's okay. So, I will just enact a strategy that me and Will tend to go with a fair bit and just grab an aging veteran that's going to produce and then maybe load up on some younger guys here. So I'm going to lock in Drew Brees. Should last me or should be productive this year. Maybe I get another year out of him, but then later in the draft, I'll look to add a Drew Lock, a Herbert, maybe a Bridgewater. We'll see how people fall to me. They should fall given it's a 1 QB league, but we're going to lock in Mr. Breeze as our quarterback. Darrell Henderson, Matt Breida, and John Brown go off the board. Picks to you, Rocky.
Okay, so my last pick here. I will say I love the Breeze pick, not the Jones pick. So it's great value there. I agree. If anyone follows me on Twitter, I've used the hashtag #NeverRojo many times. So I don't think he's very good at football. I'm a Keyshawn Vaughn truther a little bit. So, but I can definitely see it in the 10th round. Not to criticize your pick too much, but so now I got to make a pick here. I still only have 2 receivers. What's on the board is Campbell, Robbie Anderson, Jamison Crowder, as you mentioned earlier, Edelman. Not much else I love beyond that. And I think I'm going to go with your advice there, Steve. I think I'm going to take Crowder. I like you said, I like the floor play. Mims is a rookie. So who knows what we're going to get from him? I don't love doing this, but I have Bell also, but I'm hoping Bell becomes a trade piece. I don't love having multiple guys on the same team unless it's quarterback and wide receiver. But like you said, he's a nice floor play as my wide receiver 3. Mims is a rookie. Perryman, who knows what they're going to get out of him. Jamison Crowder definitely could be the highest target guy in that offense this season. So I'll take Crowder, take the volume, take the targets, and we'll see what happens. So the next 2 picks were Zach Moss and Tua at 11-10, which brings us to Will for, I guess, the last pick of this mock draft.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of guys that are in contention to me here. Looking at a young tight end is something that I was thinking about. And I felt the likes of Ian Thomas, Irv Smith, Blake Jarwin is someone that, as an Eagles fan, tough to say I am pretty high on this year. I think he could really break out. Obviously, a lot of mouths to feed there, but good offense. And Jay Sternberger. So, I don't think I would go with one of them here, knowing that we still have 7 picks left. But those are guys that would be on my radar here to take in the near future. As of guys that I'm looking at now, running back position, really not too much. Jordan Howard's, interesting for 2020. Cohen, more of a safe option. I think he went earlier this round, but Alexander Madison is a great pick here in the 11th round. I think he's got a ton of value, potentially this year if something happens with Cook where he holds out or gets hurt again. But even, beyond that, if Cook leaves, he could be a workhorse. So I think that was a good pick. Other than that, there's really not too many running backs I like, so I'd probably go back to the wide receiver position. Steve and I were both somewhat big on Robbie Anderson, but just don't know what to think of him or Curtis Samuel this year. I think they're going to eat into each other's work a lot. I think DJ Moore will get a lot of work, but not thrilled there. Brian Edwards is interesting. I don't know that I would go him here, but I know Steve and I were really big on him as a late second, early third round rookie pick. Edelman would make a lot of sense, but I don't know that I want to pair him with Harry. So the guy that I think I'm going to take here, wide receiver-wise, is Paris Campbell. I think he had, some flashes last year, but he was electric at Ohio State. I'm a Penn State grad, so he saw him, rip us up a couple of times a few years ago. So I do think that he's got a, opportunity there. I like Pittman a lot, so I think Pittman, I believe, already went in this draft. But I think Campbell has a chance to break out, and just kind of putting together a bunch of young receivers on this team, kind of really trying to fill that out. And if I can get one or two of them to break out, then I've got my flexes covered there. So we'll go Paris Campbell here for the last pick, and Brian Edwards goes there at the 12th spot.
Awesome. So what we're going to do here is take a moment to each run down our team and give some quick thoughts here. We typically move left to right, so I'll go first. Rocky, you can recap your team, and then we'll finish us off. So for my team here at quarterback, we got Drew Brees. At the running back position, we have Zeke, Jonathan Taylor, Todd Gurley, J.K. Dobbins, and Ronald Jones. Then at wide receiver, we got Tyler Lockett, Christian Kirk, Brandon Cooks, AJ Green, and at tight end, Hayden Hurst. Overall, I do really like the team. The big glaring issue for me is probably the Todd Gurley pick. Given how heavy things went at wide receiver, I probably could have waited until the 4th for him to get back to me. I think J.K. Dobbins' ADP was higher than Todd Gurley's, so I could have waited. I don't know, maybe you guys would have sniped him in the 4th, but I would have liked this team more if I would have grabbed maybe like Calvin Ridley, Metcalf, Sutton, someone like that at that spot, and then Todd Gurley next, or J.K. Dobbins in the 4th. And then instead of Brandon Cooks or Christian Kirk, maybe I go with Kareem Hunt or Keyshawn Vaughn, James Conner, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, one of the volume plays maybe. So that would be the only thing that I would change. Other than that, I like the start halfway through this draft. Rocky, what do you think of your team?
Okay, yeah, my team. I got Dak at QB, Mixon, Eckler, Chris Carson, Le'Veon, and Sony at running back. And then I got the 3 receivers, Parker, Deontay Johnson, Jamison Crowder, and then Kittle and Gesicki at tight end. And I like it okay. It's not as good as I would have liked, I think. I think I didn't love the wide receiver value in the 4th, but seeing how the draft went, I ended up taking Dak there because I didn't love anybody else. But I think I would have rather passed on a quarterback there, maybe get somebody like a Stafford, like you guys were saying later. I maybe could have drafted a McLaurin there. I did think that was a little early for him, but I do love McLaurin. Or even a Robert Woods. Again, would have been kind of early given his ADP, but I think he could have a low-end wide receiver one season this year. That, I think, is the biggest mistake I made. And like I said, it's against what I normally do. I normally don't draft QBs early. So in an actual draft, I may not have taken Dak there. But Overall, I mean, I like the running back depth. I think I can probably trade one of those guys for a wide receiver to upgrade that position if this was an actual draft. As I mentioned, I love Eckler in the third. And Kittle was a difference maker at tight end. So I don't think it's a bad team, but I just wish I maybe hadn't drafted Dak in the fourth now that I look back at it, especially the way the wide receivers just flew off there. So I guess that brings us to Will.
Yeah, I like the start of my team. There's a couple picks in the middle rounds that I may have, obviously hindsight 2020, knowing what happened after, maybe went back on, but got Kyler Murray at quarterback. Running backs, Nick Chubb, Kenyon Drake, and then Mostert as the third running back. We've got Godwin, DK Metcalf, Marvin Jones, N'Keal Harry, Brandon Ayuk, and Paris Campbell all at the wide receiver position. And then Zach Ertz at the tight end position. So not having a more solid wide receiver 3. I obviously like Marvin Jones, but maybe would have taken a wide receiver earlier. If I didn't get Jones, I think I really would have been kicking myself not getting one earlier, but that worked out. I think the other big thing is not having a ton of running back depth. I'm really happy with Chubb and Drake, and then Mostert, is going to be good for this year. But beyond 2020, even 2021, I'd really probably be looking at the running back position. But with the young wide receivers I have, I'd be hoping to either parlay them into a pick or parlay them into a younger running back, or even a pick to, look to the running back position in the rookie draft. So I think the big thing here, I do think I probably would have still taken Kyler, and even seeing the running quarterbacks after him, just because I do think he is the real deal. But Ertz is probably the pick that maybe I'd wait and get a Gesicki or a Hooper there in the 10th, 9th, or 10th round, and then be able to go with a Rager or probably more of like a Parker or Thielen as wide receiver 3, especially being a little more now.
Awesome. Well, that's going to conclude the mock draft episode. Rocky, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. If you don't mind, I just realized earlier in the show, I neglected to give the Twitter handle for the pod, which is at Dynasty Junkies. I just wanted to get that in there because Dustin would kill me if I didn't do
that. well, yeah, let's plug. Where can we find you and Dustin on Twitter?
Again, I'm at Dynasty FF Addict. He's at Dynasty Junkie FF. I just mentioned where the pod is. And also, everybody should follow the DAP network, which is at DAP_network. There's a couple other great pods on there, as I mentioned earlier, Trade Addicts and Fantasy Timeline. Those guys are great as well. So follow all those Twitter handles, listen to all those pods, subscribe and everything, and you won't regret it.
Awesome. Yeah. And give us a follow on Twitter at TrustYourBoard. Give us a like if you could. Give us a 5-star rating. We'd really appreciate it. Then turn around, go listen to Rocky's podcast and do the same. Make us all very happy.
Would appreciate that.
Thanks for joining us today. Always remember, trust your board.